Today, we're jumping into one of Shakespeare's most beloved comedies, As You Like It. But we're not just going to talk about the romance and the clever disguises in the Forest of Arden. We're actually going a level deeper to look at the story behind the words, how the text we read today even exists, which, believe me, is a whole story in itself.
Right from the get-go, Shakespeare just throws us into the deep end. There's no slow build-up. The play literally opens mid-sentence, dropping us right into a pretty nasty family argument. So this is Orlando, the youngest son of a nobleman who has recently died. He's talking to Adam, an old family servant, and he is just venting. See, his father left him some money, but more importantly, he told the eldest brother, Oliver, to make sure Orlando got a proper education. But Oliver has totally ignored that, and Orlando is, well, he's had enough. And the second Oliver shows up, all that resentment just boils over. You can feel the contempt when Oliver calls him boy. Orlando snaps, grabs him, and says the spirit of their father is rising up in him. The insults start flying. This isn't just a little spat between brothers. It's a deep, ugly conflict that kicks off Orlando's entire journey. It's a killer opening scene for sure, but it brings up a question that, let's be honest, most of us never even think to ask when we read Shakespeare. How do we know that these are the exact words he wanted? Are we reading the real thing? The answer is way more complicated than you'd think. To figure this out, we've got to hit pause on the story for a minute and zoom way out. We need to look at how these plays survived for more than 400 years. And let me tell you, it was not a neat and tidy process. Here's the thing that kind of blows your mind when you first hear it. There is no single, perfect master copy of Shakespeare's work. He didn't hand in a final manuscript that got locked away in a vault. Nothing like that exists. So what editors have to work with are early printed versions. You've got the quartos, which were like the small, cheap paperbacks of their day, and then you have the first folio. That was the big, prestigious collection his friends put together after he died. The problem is, for a lot of plays, these versions are different. Sometimes it's a word, sometimes it's entire scenes. So every editor has to be a detective, choosing which version to trust and what to include. And those choices, well, they aren't always just about fixing a typo. Sometimes an editor's own ideas about what's proper can totally change the play we end up reading.
Okay, check out this wild example from The Tempest. There's a scene where young Miranda gives this blistering speech to Caliban. But for hundreds of years, editors in the 19th century thought it was too indecent for a young woman to say. So they just took the lines away from her and gave them to her dad, Prospero. And they didn't do it because of some new textual discovery. They did it because of their own Victorian values. So if editors can just change things like that, how can we trust what we're reading today? Well, modern scholars like the ones at the Folger Shakespeare Library have a really brilliant solution. They show their work. They call it transparent editing. Instead of quietly making changes and pretending this is the one perfect text, they use a really simple system of brackets to show you exactly where they've stepped in. It's like letting you look over their shoulder as they work. First up, you've got your standard square brackets. If you see words inside these, it means the editor brought them in from another source, like a quarto. They're basically saying, hey, we think this line was missing from our main copy, so we've added it in from this other version. Then there are these, the half-square brackets. These signal a stage direction that an editor added. The original texts had very few stage directions, so if an editor adds something like threatening Orlando, to make the action clearer for us modern readers, they put it in these brackets.
And finally, angle brackets. Think of these as a typo fix. Printing was a messy business 400 years ago, so if there's an obvious mistake, editors will correct it and put their correction in these brackets. By showing us all of this, they put the power back in our hands, as the reader.
All right, now that we know we can trust the words on the page, let's jump back into the story and see what happens after that big fight. As you can probably guess, things get a whole lot worse before they get better. The cruelty that Orlando faced from his brother, well, it's all over the court. The new duke banishes his own niece, Rosalind. But in this amazing act of friendship, the duke's daughter, Celia, says, "No way, I'm going with you." So they plan their escape. Rosalind disguises herself as a guy named Ganymede for safety. At the exact same time, Orlando learns his brother is actually planning to murder him, so he has to run for his life too. And where's everyone heading? You guessed it, the Forest of Arden. So we've really been following two different stories here, haven't we? There's the story of the characters escaping a corrupt court, and then there's the story of the text itself and how it escaped through time to get to us. And these two stories are connected in a really cool way. The director of the Folger Library, Michael Whitmore, put it perfectly. He said Shakespeare's works invite us to make them our own. All that careful, transparent editing isn't about creating one single correct version. It's about giving us an honest text, one that lets us see the history behind it so we can confidently dig in, ask questions, and find our own meaning in these amazing words. Once you understand how the text is put together, you stop being just a passive reader. You become an active participant. You can see the choices, you can understand the history, and you can appreciate the genius even more. So, the only question left, really, is what are you going to discover?